Italiana zerilli-marimò. My name is Stefano Albertini. I'm the director. It's a great pleasure to welcome you this evening for this presentation with filmmaker Alina Marazzi. I will leave the pleasure and honor to introduce Alina to my colleague Anna McCarthy. But I just wanted to welcome you and to tell you that Alina is going to come back in the spring. She's going to be the first in a series, what we hope will become a series of artists in residence at the Casa and the Department of Italian Studies. It's sort of a joint commitment with them, and in this case, film studies. So this is just an introduction to what will come. NYU students will be lucky enough to have a chance to take Professor, yeah. Because she has a brother who is also a professor. You are very proper too. Who was a visiting professor in this department. So Professor Marazzi will be back in the spring, and we will also organize some public events with screening of her film. So I'm here just to tell you to stay tuned, and Alina is going to be back for more. And without further ado, Anna McCarthy is going to introduce Alina.
Thank you very much, sir. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. Alina Marazzi is a documentary, fiction, film, and theater director. Much of her work focuses on female subjectivity, motherhood, and memory, or memory loss, I think of as with motherhood. Her other films include the award-winning For One More Hour with You, Forever, All About You, Borderlands, and Anna Piaggi, A Visionary in the Fashion World. She's also collaborated with composer Mauro Montalbetti on 2 contemporary operas. So as you heard, in spring 2018, she'll be a filmmaker in residence at the Department of Italian Studies here, and she'll be teaching a class, a 2-credit class on recycling cinema, which will start after the spring break, and I think we'll get a sense of her methods. That'll be a nice preview tonight. And also, she's going to be doing a short workshop for PhD students and moving image archiving and preservation students in film studies. Details to be worked out later. So please join me in welcoming Alina Marazzi.
Hello, good evening. Thank you everybody for the invitation and for showing up, for being here. I was here just over a year ago showing some of my work, so I'm sorry if somebody has already seen my work and heard me talk about the same things, but this is what I'm here for. And yes, I will be back in the spring for 7 weeks, and I'll be teaching a course which will be also a seminar. So I will encourage students even to either to produce a short film or write a paper, an essay on specifically on the use of archival footage and the possible practice of recycling archival footage, and specifically home movies. Because this is the kind of work that I've specialized with, and my work is known in Italy especially for this practice that I've developed over the years, starting in 2002 with the film Un'ora sola ti vorrei, For One More Hour with You, which is an hour-long film all made with private home movies, my family's home movies. So starting from that film, which tells the story, it's actually a portrait of my mother, through the private images, writing, and private journals, I have developed this skill, let's say, and pursued this passion and attraction which I have for images from the past, so images of memories. And this is why I gave this title to the talk and to the course, Private Images, Public Memories. Also, in my latest film, which is a hybrid fiction film, All About You, which was released in Italy in 2013, which is a fiction intertwined with different media, documentary footage, animation, and once again, home movies. I deal with the reinterpretation of private images, taking them out from their original context and putting them in a new context, and therefore, in a way, recontextualizing them and somehow changing the original meaning, always with a respectful approach towards this private material. So these are more or less the issues that I deal with and the questions they address in my films, which are narrative films, documentary style films. They're so-called montage films. I don't know, it's not important to label films in this way, but certainly they're not straightforward fiction or straightforward documentaries, and absolutely not mainstream films, even though they have been released in Italy, in movie theaters. They've been on TV, and thank you, and on DVD. So they're not too abstract or too experimental, don't worry. And what I wanted to show tonight is, and focus is, I wanted to talk to you about this film, We Want Roses Too, Vogliamo Anche le Rose, which is a film that I made 10 years ago, about the 1970s in Italy, so about the very intense decade in time, not only in Italy, of course, and specifically the film is focusing on the women's movement and partly on Italian feminism. So it is true that in all of my film, I strive and I want to, is an intention, the one of putting female women's stories at the center of the narration, because this I feel it as an urge, as a filmmaker, as a woman, of course. I feel the need of yes, putting women at the center of storytelling, and also as a filmmaker, somebody who's working and producing images or reinterpreting images, like, since I'm working a lot with found footage, questioning the representation of women in cinema. And so thinking about these issues, I really wanted to make a film about the time in which, not only in Italy, very important changes occurred in the life of women and in general in society. And I wanted to address that time, the 1970s, a time that I didn't experience in first, as first-hand experience, but I was a child, so I do remember the atmosphere, and I had memories of some images. I wanted to address that decade by interrogating the documents, the visual documents, the texts and photographs of the time. So I didn't want to go back and look back at that recent Italian history by, for instance, in the documentary form, by interviewing people who were the protagonists of the time, interviewing the protagonists of the feminist movement and so on. As being a younger woman, obviously wanted to somehow reconnect to that legacy, which also I felt as an urge as a younger woman, a woman from a younger generation, which somehow had lost contact with those very fundamental issues that were part of the day-to-day agenda of people, it seemed to be, but not so much today. And so this was the starting point. So I wanted, and this is how I worked as a practice, I wanted to work with the images from that time and somehow create a relationship between myself as a filmmaker, as a woman, with those images, and retell the story, reinterpreting in a way, or trying to understand history through the images, through first-hand accounts, as I said, archival footage, but also women's writings, private women's writing. And so the outcome of this research and work is a feature-length documentary, which could be defined as a montage film because it's all made with archival footage. And yes, I think I should show a first clip of the film, and then we can comment on the film. And I would like to, I'm gonna explain how I worked on, putting together all these different materials, all these different cinematic genre. So I will just start with the screening, lights down.
Curiosità, sei donna. Vedere, sapere. Che sarà? Come sarà? Il passare del tempo, il tuo futuro. Guarda.
In quell'occasione l'ha visto per la prima volta? Non l'aveva mai visto prima il suo futuro
No,
fidanzato?
mai.
E quando l'ha visto cosa è successo? Subito lei ha capito...
Ma mi è uscito un po' simpatico.
No, non ha capito subito che quello sarebbe stato l'uomo della sua vita.
No.
E quando l'ha capito?
Beh, dopo un po' di giorni.
E lei, invece?
Anche.
Ah, allora avete incominciato così, un po' per scherzo.
No, per scherzo. Come cominciano quasi tutti i giovani.
Alla sottana di mamma, sempre attaccate in verità, le signorine da marito, con l'occhio pien di ingenuità, traperan la verginità da tutti i pori del vestito. Compresa da tanto candor, la mamma vuol spiegare a loro come si acquista un buon partito. E fin dalla prima lezione imparan tutto menadito, le signorine da marito.
Perché ancora in Italia si resta indietro? Io ritengo che ciò che principalmente crea questa situazione è il nostro diritto familiare. L'articolo 144 si intitola, ed è questo l'importante, si intitola potestà maritale. Nel secolo in cui gli uomini vanno sulla luna si stabilisce che il marito è il capo della famiglia. A lui è riservato il potere di dirigere la famiglia, di amministrarla. Inoltre l'articolo 151, l'adulterio della donna è una delle ragioni per ottenere la separazione per colpa di lei. L'adulterio del marito no. Il delitto d'onore viene punito con una pena minima, mentre lei pensi che per il parricidio comune c'è l'ergastolo. Solamente attraverso la parità raggiunta prima di tutto nella famiglia che noi potremo veramente mutare la mentalità sociale.
di Annabella, buongiorno. Attenda che gliela passo,
Cosa vuole?
Sentimenti.
Dunque, 21 ottobre 49, bilancio. Pronto? Buongiorno. Quanti anni ha, signorine? E lui? Attende?
Infatti ha fatto male, lo sa,
Allora, se l'ospite non ci dice, si ripete un'esperienza in quanto
lavoro con marito quanto
Comunque questa persona che sappia fare che c'è il
suo marito ha intenzione di viaggiare, di andare via.
Beh, quello, signora, non glielo vedo destinato, Se vuole andare avanti così sportivamente finché non arriva a quello giusto.
2582 Annabella, buongiorno.
Ho 25 anni, 2 bambini che amo e che sopporto male. Un marito a cui interesso principalmente come donna oggetto, ancella e madre, anche se dice di amarmi. E forse ci amiamo talvolta. Forse la colpa è mia, non ho abbastanza fantasia per trasformare il nostro letto in un prato. La sostanza è però l'infelicità di entrambi. So che siamo in tanti a sentirci così, ma perché? Forse eravamo inadatti al matrimonio? Questa è una domanda un po' generica. Vorrei sentire qualcuno, per esempio tu, Tea.
Ma il problema non è se una persona è adatta o non adatta al matrimonio, forse il problema è se una persona è adatta o non adatta alla vita, no? Cioè, che cosa chiede alla vita, che cosa vuole? Certo che se per lei il matrimonio è stato il suo massimo sogno, poi non si è nemmeno chiesta cosa poi sarebbe stato il matrimonio, cioè al di là del fatto di sposarsi non si è mai posto il problema, evidentemente adesso si trova in quel niente che si era preparata prima.
Dice di essere considerata solo donna oggetto e ancella del marito, è perché lei stessa non è riuscita a essere altro, non ne ha avuto la possibilità, non è colpa sua. Probabilmente non ha potuto fare esperienze prima del matrimonio, forse ne ha avuto paura. È stata educata in una famiglia che la teneva molto stretta. Oggi alle ragazze viene insegnato che devono soprattutto sposarsi, che quello è il loro destino.
Beh, no, speriamo.
Anche se lo insegnano, è bene che a un certo punto uno si duri le orecchie.
Sorry, I have to stop because it's not a film screening. But yes, I did mention that the film is some light perhaps. The film is about the 70s, but as you have seen from this first 8 minutes, more or less, the film, this is a kind of introduction which is leading up to the decades of the 70s. So I'm starting visually from the 1950s with this woman dressed in yellow who's entering the shop, and the voiceover saying curiosity, woman, curiosity, and so on. And in fact, originally that was a commercial, 1950s commercial for anti-wrinkle cream. And I manipulated the image inside the crystal ball. As you have noticed, the irony is a key that I'm, by which I am kind of approaching this. Those very intense years, and also not always very light years, but I felt the need of putting some color and some irony, because the film is actually dealing, with issues as sexuality, abortion, divorce, and all these issues which were on the Italian political agenda of the time, and actually still today in a way. And so, as you have seen from this introduction, there's a variety of different materials which go from commercial to animation of the time, the Cinderella style animation that is towards the end of the sequence. There's some black and white footage from Italian television. For instance, the woman reading the tarot cards, she's basically, responding to women calling at this. It's actually the office of a woman's magazine, quite well-known women's magazines of the 60s and 70s. And the director of this magazine is reading out one of the letters, which is also one way that I am bringing into the film, yes, the questions that women were asking at the time. And you have seen this sequence of the fotoromanzo, the photo novel, which was a very popular kind of literature that was very popular in Italy, but this kind of popular press was also a way for women who belonged to a more simple background to express their feelings, and they were addressing their letters to the magazines. This was the first way for women coming, yes, from a simple background to being able to express a kind of frustration about their role in society and within marriage and the family. And so this introduction, this very mixed media introduction, is somehow introducing the themes that I am developing in the film. So when I started to think about making a film on the 60s and 70s, as I said, I really wanted to only use material. I didn't want to produce my own material in a way, and I thought that one way of creating an interesting way of creating a narration would have been to also go and look for women's writings and use a first-person narration in the sense of the I, first-person narration, in order to give an account of those years, which were in fact very collective years in a way, but I was interested in how a collective movement, such a women's movement or feminist movement, would influence and determine people's life, specifically women's life, on a subjective level. And this is why at the beginning of the film I'm also using this footage of the letter that has been sent to the magazine. I went looking for women's writing in an archive in Italy, which is a very interesting place in Tuscany, which has been existing for 30 years now, and it's an archive of private journals, private diaries. Archivio dei diari, which is a very unusual place, you may think, because why would somebody who's keeping a diary would want to donate a diary to a public archive? But in fact, maybe there is something behind private writing, autobiographical writing, that maybe is not just an urge of expressing one's feeling on paper, but maybe a diary journal has been written for then somebody to read it at some point in the future. So I did do a research in that archive alongside very wide research in many different archives in Italy, not just the institutional film archives such as State TV archive or Istituto Luce, but I really went and did a kind of door-to-door research, searching for videotapes, Super 8s, photographs, and private home movies and all these, and experimental movies, Italian underground experimental films, because I wanted to create a kind of fresco, a very heterogeneous fresco of all the different experiences that people were living through, and all these different expressions through film that would really give an account of how heterogeneous that the 1970s were. And so the beginning sequence is just an example of all this mix that I do. I mix black and white, color, and somehow I create a new language by taking the original footage and, as I was saying before, and making it, putting in relation to a different different footage and creating a new syntax in a way. Now to go back to the women's writing, I want to show you an example of this, an example of how I put in relation the person's writing with the images. And so I go towards the end of the film, and I want to show you this clip, which is more specific to the 1970s, and it's a diary of a woman called Valentina. She's an engaged woman. She's involved in a political movement, so it's the way she writes, it's also very interesting because it's already very ideological. And so this is towards the end of the film. I will show you. And how I use more experimental films towards the end. Films were also made by experimental women filmmakers of the time.
Movimento femminista di liberazione, potrete trovare la soluzione a tutti i vostri problemi. Potete parlare liberamente di sesso, maternità, contraccezione, aborto, famiglia, prostituzione, scuola, infanzia, vecchiaia, mestruazione e menopausa. Signori, signorine, bambini, vi aspettiamo. Buonasera.
Femminista, non si aborto, contraccezione, la sessualità, maternità, la società, bla bla bla. Non c'è problema se non affrontiamo, non c'è problema se non risolviamo. La famiglia noi distruggiamo e le coppie e ragioniamo. Perdiamo e non lo siete, noi renderete,
novembre 1979. Bisogna trovare un modello da seguire. Ci guardiamo intorno e vediamo che non ce ne sono. Alcune riescono a farsi dare i soldi dal marito, qualche altra ha avuto sempre uomini importanti. E ci sono forse le vere emancipate, quelle che passano da un uomo all'altro, ma con caratteristiche di stabilità. E parliamo ovviamente di compagne. «23 novembre. Tornata a Roma ho pensato che da qualche tempo non riesco a scrivere il diario. O meglio, non riesco a scrivere le cose che vorrei dire nel diario. Il diario può essere sempre un momento rubato, come talvolta faccio portandomelo appresso nelle più diverse circostanze. Dato autobiografico. Quando sto male, la mia vera unica paura è quella di non saper reggere a tutte le immagini di me nel mondo. Quelle vere, quelle che non so dire, quelle che gli altri mi buttano addosso. Mi chiedo, si può scrivere una cosa che vuole volare verso l'esterno senza censurarsi? Mi chiedo, posso scrivere oggi, mentre so che devo terminare presto la ricerca, che devo scrivere 2 o 3 articoli, che devo andare al governo vecchio, che devo tentare di trovare qualcuno che mi erotizzi, che devo... 10 dicembre. Il filo conduttore vuole essere i rapporti con le donne, ma con un senso di dispetto, perché da questa macchina da scrivere mi sento in diritto di guardarle come un osservatore privilegiato. Fate, tanto vi fotografo. Troppo stanca per applicarmi in qualcosa, troppo bruttina e infreddolita per raggiungere Maddalena a teatro, troppo complessata e indecisa per sapere se non vedere Dario con cena e scopata. Sto pensando che mi sento una diversa sessualmente, incapace di godere, e che quando sento o percepisco donne che hanno scopato bene nella vita, provo un senso di fastidio, un'invidia, una rivalsa.
Se si considera che normalmente le donne, per raggiungere l'orgasmo, hanno bisogno di una stimolazione più lunga di quella del maschio, che un numero notevole di donne non conosce mai l'orgasmo per tutta la vita, è necessario che molti rivedano il proprio comportamento se vogliono pervenire ad un rapporto armonioso, completo con la propria compagna.
Ieri ho incontrato una persona. Una donna che mi conosceva dai tempi del matrimonio con Claudio. Mi ricordava muta. Mi ha fatto venire in mente una parte della mia vita che nascondo come si fa con la spazzatura sotto il tappeto. Il mio pensiero più fisso mentre preparavo la rottura con lui era: se rimango qui non ce la farò mai a fare le cose che mi piacciono. Altrimenti Claudio non mi avrebbe mai lasciata, perché per lui restavo un mistero. Sapeva benissimo di non possedermi sessualmente. E questo voleva dire che in qualche modo io possedevo lui, anche se tutti e due facevamo finta di niente. Torno a casa dal governo vecchio, dalla riunione del comitato di gestione, fatta al bar che è più caldo e se va bene c'è la torta con il tè. È un luogo mondano come la canasta di mia madre, solo che è la mondanità delle pezzenti. Alle altre donne che stanno al bar della gestione non gliene frega niente. Cazzeggiano, amoreggiano, si fanno uno spino. Intorno al nostro tavolino invece il nervo politico, che sarebbe un gruppetto composto da A. oneste madri di famiglia, B. politicizzate estremiste, C. devianti rivoltose. Francesco mi ha telefonato, ci siamo visti. Fare l'amore con Francesco non è più bello come prima. Lui dice che è un fatto di istinti, ma io non credo agli istinti. L'amore lo faccio con la testa. Ricordo una sera, eravamo a letto, verso le 7 telefonò una. C'era una riunione importante perché era stato gambizzato un ginecologo da un comando di sole donne. Tornai tardi e trovai la lampada accesa e un foglio, freddino. Non posso aspettarti mentre fai le tue cose. Ma Francesco era nascosto in cucina e il biglietto era uno scherzo. Quello che mi piaceva di più in quel momento era gratificarlo della parte poco maschile che aveva scelto di recitare. Tralascio di ricordarmi come dovette essere stato bello poi fare l'amore.
L'amore è in genere un sistema di dipendenze. Ma insomma, in gran parte nasconde, cioè è una parola equivoca. È una parola equivoca. Si dice amore e per amore si intende sacrificarsi per un altro. È una parola che mi pare un po' non chiara, ecco. Diciamo desiderio di stare con una persona.
E avete mai pensato realmente di lasciarli?
Sì.
Poi ragioni. Per quali ragioni? Io mi ricordo che una volta... Vediamo come si ricostruisce. Femminismo. Femminismo. Accuso... Cioè il discorso su...
Sentirsi aggredito.
Mi sono sentito violentemente aggredito e sbattuto sbattuto pesantemente a terra, calpestato. Dopodiché uno dice questo è il nuovo modello di rapporto delle donne con gli uomini, o ci stai oppure sei un maschio fascista.
È importante che la moglie sia vergine?
Sì, importantissimo.
Ha sentito parlare delle femministe? Secondo lei chi sono, cosa vogliono, perché lo fanno? Hanno ragione, hanno torto? Cosa...
No, hanno ragione. Siccome da noi a CE queste cose non si usano, perciò andiamo d'accordo. Cosa dice mio marito io devo fare. Da me comanda soltanto mio marito.
Allora lei non è femminista?
No.
Ha detto che hanno ragione?
Hanno ragione per me.
Come va per me?
Per me, ma per mio marito ha un'altra testa. Mio marito ha un'altra testa.
Il marito ha un'altra testa?
Sì.
Per esempio, suo marito aiuta in casa, lava i piatti?
No.
Non ha mai cambiato i pannolini a un bambino?
No, mai.
2 febbraio. Mi sono tagliata i capelli. Finalmente, non capisco.
Okay. So, yes, this is the way I used and I created these connections between Valentina's diary, which of course was a much longer diary. I did a work of editing on the text and putting it into relation with the other footage, which of course is sound footage. So there's people being interviewed, the couple being interviewed about their relationship, or footage showing these meetings of women in, for instance, the black and white footage is the video footage is from this occupied house in Rome, which was a very important headquarter for the feminist movement. And then again, these interviews, for instance, with the funny interview with the Sicilian couple, which is showing a completely different situation, occurring exactly at the same time. So what I really was interested was really to convey this variety of perspectives and point of views, and somehow of different realities which were coexisting at the same time, which in fact are always coexisting at all times. But since these issues were very strongly felt at the time, I thought it was an interesting way of illustrating Italian society and people's feelings and moods and ideas to do with those time. Of course, the woman who's cutting her hair in this black and white Super 8, she's not Valentina, although I associated her face, her figure, with the voice of the actress who's reading the diary. And so that is the way in which I somehow created a mise-en-scène, because I took a text which is, a real text written by a real woman in the 70s, and then I took this experimental film of this woman cutting her hair and then the split screen and so on, and put the two together in order to create a character. So in a way, that is an example of how I wrote somehow or fictionalized certain sequences in order to give face, voice, and body to the words of the diary. In the film, I'm using 3 different diaries. This is the 3rd diary, as I said, is a diary that the woman who was not called Valentina, in fact, wrote in the year 78, 79. So the film is constructed more or less in this way. It keeps going back and forth between a kind of first-person subjective narration to a more collective chorus of voices. And the reason why I used first-person narration and wanted to create this movement between collective voice and a single voice, it was because it was to do with the 70s, and the 70s was the first time that somehow gave value to private experience, and women started to realize that their personal issues were not just their own individual problems, but they were shared by other women, and so the private became political, as a famous slogan from the 70s. And so this is why narrative terms in the film, I decided as a practice to use the singular voice, which would then echo in the collective storytelling. So not only the film is about the 70s and women experience the 70s, but I tried in my practice to somehow adopt also a feminist approach by creating this this narrative in this way. And the film was released in Italy in 2007, at the time during which there was a political campaign for a political election. You know that we have political elections every year, so that's not very unusual. But at the time was exactly 2007, 30 years after the year 77, which was a very hot year in terms of politics in Italy. And the law for illegal abortion in Italy was approved in 78. And in 2007, during this political campaign, there was quite an influential journalist who founded a political party which wanted to revise and go back on the law called 914, which is the law that was passed in 78 to legalize abortion. So the film, strangely enough, came out or was done. Maybe, you know, it wasn't just, you know, maybe there was an urge to talk or to reconnect to the history of 70s that I felt, and maybe also, you know, people working with me felt. This is why in the year 2007 we talked about the history that occurred 30 years before. And the film was released, as I said, in movie theaters during this political campaign, and it was very interesting because it created a lot of debate and somehow helped to remember, you know, what was the debate in the 70s. And anyway, but that political party never won the election in the end. So this is more or less what I wanted to talk to you about. So I'll be happy to hear your comments, take your questions, and of course invite prospective students to come back in the spring and to work together in the form of a seminar focusing. Yeah.
That political party that you mentioned, was one of their demands to be paid for housework?
Demands to be?
To be paid for the work that women do in the house. Because I seem to remember in the 70s that there was a group of Italian women who came to the States.
Yeah.
And they did a presentation and they spoke about this. So were they
there was a movement. There was a movement for house, you know, wage, salary for housewife. Was there not here in the States? No, but anyway, housewives never got a salary.
Like, you know, childcare used to be an issue, but no one even talks about it now.
But yes, there was a movement for, you know, was one of the requests amongst many requests for contraception. Contraception was illegal in Italy until 71. And so only wealthy women would be able to travel to Switzerland to buy the pill if they were living in the north, which was quite easy, so it's completely hypocritical. And so illegal abortion was a common way of, was a common contraception, you know, sadly enough. And and then divorce became legal in 74 and abortion in 78. And so has remained legal, yes, has remained legal. But of course the debate is still very relevant, because, you know, it's an ethical debate, which in a way is a never-ending debate, because it's such a, you know, personal issue, not only a political issue. But at the time, which was 10 years ago, this party was, you know, was founded specifically to fight against the law that made abortion legal. So it's strange that, you know, 30 years afterwards, this also liberal and progressive journalist who founded the party made a point, put it at the center of his campaign. And so it was scary.
I really liked watching all of your material, and it made me think a lot about Ireland, which is a country I work on, which is, you know, this seems very progressive in relationship to Ireland, which is still facing an abortion referendum now. It strikes me that if you look at Ireland in the 70s, you would hear women talking about the names of articles in the Constitution that they want to switch, which is very similar. But it's all governed by the church. And did you find, what strikes me is how much women are at the center of your imagery here. Did that exclude, because of the image rules that you'd set for yourself, the use of men in the form of the church and the hierarchy? Did that help kind of move the hierarchy?
Yeah, well, in fact, the central part of the film focuses on the diary of a woman who undergoes illegal abortion. and it's a very strong piece of writing. And in the imagery that I used, there is one sequence. There's a television debate in which there's a group of women, and they talk specifically about abortion. And there's a priest in the TV studio, and that is, for instance, this is how the church comes into the film, but not only through that. At the beginning, the first diary that I'm also using, the diary of a middle-class girl who grows up in a very Catholic environment, quite upper middle class, and feeling completely frustrated and repressed, and feeling the authority of the father figure very strongly. And so she, in her writing, she debates a lot within herself to do with her Catholic upbringing. So there is this, and then there are other voices of women, of working class women, to do with the contraceptive pill that are in the film. But yes, I did make a point in the search, in the film search, and in the editing, to focus and bring women to the forefront. So also the 70s in Italy are known for being quite violent years, a lot of street demonstrations, guerrilla fight, and this is the kind of imagery that we have of the 70s, and I want to somehow go beyond this. It's not a stereotypical representation, but it's the most common representation of Italy in the 70s, and I really wanted to go and see what women were, to show what women were discussing about in the houses, behind, in the domestic space, in the kitchens, what they were writing in their diaries. I was not so interested in showing, what the men were doing in the streets with their Molotov bottles and so on, because this we've seen so much. And so this is why I'm saying that the practice of going, making a point of really going further into the search, I made an effort to go and search for images which were not, the easily, the images that I could easily find in the institutional archives. And for instance, going and talking to women who were protagonists of the time of the movement, I went and talked to these women and asked them if they had photographs or Super 8s or videotape. And at first everybody said no, it's all lost. And then little by little, an open reel videotape comes up, then a Super 8, then a box of photographs, because people, in fact, luckily keep things. And so I was really interested in also using this informal material and private material. And for instance, the Super 8 I'm using in Valentina's diary, not only of the woman cutting her hair, but of the women writing, the close-up of the women writing, or the women running in the snow. They're all they all come from the work of a woman filmmaker in the 70s and early 80s, and she was one of the first women filmmakers using Super 8. So I knew of her. I went looking for her films. Real films were never to be found, because then she migrated and she went to live in Canada, where she still lives, and she left behind all of her work, which was kept in a box in an archive and was never shown again. So finally, eventually found this Super 8 and had them transferred to tape, and then eventually she saw them again after 30 years, which was also interesting to find all this material and having it come to back on the screen again. So in fact it's a very exciting process, the one of doing archival footage. Is not a boring process because behind every image there's many stories, and often I got to meet the people who were the authors, who filmed. I got to meet the 3 women who wrote the diaries, and so it's live material. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this talk. In these 10 years since the release of We Want Women to
We want women to. Yes, we want women.
We want women, we want roses too.
Yes.
We want everything and bread. Many things changed in Italian history and also in let's say the history of Italian women. Movements such as Non ora quando, then Norma di Meno, till the very recent thinking about the threat of the Casa Internazionale delle Donne in Rome. Now, I know that the movie is about a past time of Italian feminism and Italian history, but still that was your perspective, that was your 10 years ago perspective.
Yeah.
Now, would you do something different? Would you add something different from today's perspective?
Well, in fact, when I very first started working, doing the research for Vogliamo anche le rose, this new wave of feminism was just starting, and there was a very big demonstration in Italy, which I filmed at the time in 2006. And then because the original idea was somehow to arrive at the present, even then, but then somehow, it would have been a very, very long film, or it would have been a very long work. So I decided to stop towards around the year 81, which is when in Italy this first feminism movement kind of came to a halt. Afterwards there was a gap, and then now younger generations are more, it's not that they're more aware, there is this need of speaking up again, and different movements that you have mentioned are demonstrating again. And so, yes, absolutely. For instance, in the film there are some issues that are not dealt with because they were not at the center of the debate then. For instance, la fecondazione assistita, come si dice? Surrogate, non è proprio solo artificial, in vitro fertilization, which is one of a very important issue today. It struck me also how at the time women were striving to find a way how to not have children, and now is the total opposite. Is trying to find a way of how to have children because nobody's having children anymore in Italy especially. So things have changed a lot. So yes, there would be a lot to say, but for instance, what I see is that every year at the beginning of March, I start receiving many calls or emails. So would you come and show, and introduce the film, around May the 8th. I know this film has become like a text in a way, a document, which is, I think, is nice because it's a way of then simulating a debate which is to do with the present, not just with the past, because some of the questions addressed in the film, are never, they don't have an expiry date somehow. So yes, there would be.
You said that you spoke with the three women?
Yeah.
And so that was 30 years later. So
Yes.
I'm kind of wondering a couple of things. One, are they alive today, 10 years later? And 30 years later, what their thoughts were about how much has changed. And now, 10 years after that, what you think, especially in light of things that are going on here in this country, but, how much progress? How much progress we've made, not just in the academia or certain rarefied environments, but in general, culturally. In a lot of ways, you know what I mean?
Yeah, how much progress.
And I'm really interested in them. That's amazing that you got to talk to them. What were they like 30 years later, and what did they think that?
Well, you write a diary, and then they did send it to the archive, but when they wrote that, journal, they never thought that this would somehow become part of evidence of history, which is what interests me, to pick something which originally is quite small and private, but in fact, it tells about us because we can relate to that. Maybe not specifically to Valentina, but to how these women felt at the time, and yes, they were. It was a very strong experience for them to then see the film, and hear the words that they had written coming, from the film screen, and put their words into this context, and they realized, in fact, that something that they had written in a way quite casually, without giving it too much of importance, in fact, is an important account of a life experience, especially the center diary, which tells, is the account of the illegal abortion. That is, of course, is a very strong piece of writing. And when I met the woman, and she saw the film afterwards, few times, we were asked to go together, for instance, in schools, high schools, to show the film and talk about this, the abortion issue. And she really somehow took it on again, because for 30 years she never really, it's not that she didn't speak about it, but it was something that she had done, and that was it. So all three of them, in fact, they created a new connection with their own writing then, and they were proud, and they acknowledged that as part of their life, and something that perhaps had some importance, that was worth communicating through the film. So it was a very strong experience for them and for me as well, because also there is by using someone else's writing, but even using someone else's films, like I'm using some filmmakers' films, not just raw footage. There is, how do I relate to that material which somebody else has created and is part of somebody else's vision or experience? How far can I go in manipulating that material, and how, which is the distance that I keep? Of course, I think that I have respected always the material, and that has proved to be the case, especially to do with the writing of the three women, because they're very happy about it. They didn't say, no, you can't show the film because you completely misinterpreted what I wrote. So this is also an interesting question for me, as somebody who's working with previously produced filmed material. How much can I make that material mine in order to use it to create a new narration, new cinematic language, but how much, and I want to respect that material, the original intention. At the same time, by reusing it, I am changing its status, and so there are interesting, things to think about.
You said that it's fun to rummage archives.
Yes.
And I bet so, because I think they are very precious repository of creativity there.
Yeah.
My question is, don't you ever feel lost in the sea of material that you can, handle, and how do you prevent feeling overwhelmed?
Well, no, loss. No, it's true that the search could go on forever, and to do with this film, we started editing with the editor while the search was still open somehow, because, of course, it's not a scripted film, even though the way I went about it is, okay, I want to do a film about, those years in this way, such and so on, and then I started collecting material, and then I kind of wrote a breakdown of, how I wished the film would be, but then it was only when we got down to the editing we could actually, see if this idea of putting all these different things together would work. So there is a kind of breakdown, which is not exactly a script, which I followed during the editing. But when we started editing, the search for film material was still open, because, as I said, it could have been, the story could have, you know, gone for a few more years. And then I decided to stop at that certain year. So I did, for instance, find some material from the early 80s, which then I didn't use in the film, because then at some point, you know, I was making a film. I wanted to make a film which could have been accessible. Already it was quite, you know, it was quite intense as a, you know, as a theme that I was putting forward. So I put some irony in it, and I also wanted to give it a pace, a certain rhythm, and there was a producer behind it. There was a group of people working with me, so we were continuously watching and assessing the film in progress. In the end, you know, we wanted to make something which could eventually go out in the world on TV and, you know, be accessible to a general audience. So that was also something that we had in mind. So yeah, no, I like to be, in a way, maybe I like to get lost in the archives, but there is an interesting issue now that now all the images produced now in the digital era, where will they be stored? And will we be able to access, you know, these digital images? You know, we don't know, because the technology keeps changing. So in the same way now, then, you know, when I found an open reel videotape, I went looking, you know, everywhere for a lab which could do the film transfer, and I found the lab here in Queens, the only lab who had the machine still working, you know, to play this. So technology really follows, you know, and who knows if, you know, MP4 files or .mov files will be still accessible. We now store everything in, you know, hard memories, but who knows? And also, yeah, it's going to be strange. Also, there won't be that casual way of somehow, you know, stumbling into things or a piece of writing or a photograph, because you really would have to open the hard disk. The files would be in a certain order, which is not the casual order, which would be you know, numeric order. So it's going to be completely different. But
to be continued.
Yes.
I think we should probably stop, because we have to actually go somewhere. But
yeah.
Thanks very much for coming. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Alina Marazzi.